thank y'all for coming out. My name is Stacy Wilson, curator exhibitions at the Max. We are here with Felder Rushing for Yard Art, the good, the bad, and the unbelievable. Just an introduction, Felder hosts MPB's The Gestalt Gardener, which airs Fridays at 9 a.m. and Saturdays at 10 a.m. And he's co-authored 18 books and has traveled all over the world giving lectures and workshops on gardening. And by the way, he has 3 books over there that you can buy and get him to sign. And also, I want to just do a quick shout out. We have our make and takes today. That's going to be 10 to noon if y'all know anyone with little kids, and they're going to be doing plant art today. So something in conjunction with Felder. But without further ado, Felder, take it away.
Thank you, Stacy. I really appreciate the opportunity the Max has given me to come over here. And I was explaining before we got started about my truck garden. I started planting stuff in it because people were whining about not having a place to garden. I'm thinking, what's the most difficult place to garden? And so I decided to do it in the truck, and I'll show some pictures of that. But basically, it's a box with holes in the back, some dirt, some potting soil. And I'm thinking anybody who can do this can do what I've done in my truck, or you can do it in your own yard on a patio if you got no yard at all. So it's just container gardening, mixing stuff up and accessorizing. And that's what we're here to talk about today, accessorizing. Before I get started on that, let me mention this. If anybody's interested, I do have some free stickers called Yes on November 3rd to the proposed Mississippi Magnolia flag. If you're interested in those, go ahead and put them on there. We're also doing a plant swap afterwards, and I just want to show off the plant I'm bringing, a little root-looking thing. It's a plant that gets about knee-high and has these kind of flowers in it that are hidden in the foliage. They're called hidden ginger. It's perfectly hard to grow in Kentucky, and it spreads like a little clump of monkey grass, these beautiful flowers, and the root is a ginger. You can eat it like regular ginger. So it's just a pretty plant, unusual plant. You can't buy it. You got to get it from somebody, got it from somebody, but it's one that when you get tired of looking at it, you can eat it, and I like that. So anyway, well, we're here to talk about yard art, and I want to start out with find out who is this. How many of you in here would see this and thinking, I could use that? Anybody? These are just, I had a tin roof put on. It has 4 of these that the contractor just threw on the ground. He's going to throw them away. I'm thinking, no. You know how some of y'all hang stuff out holes in your ears? I can hang this in my yard. And that's just the way I roll. Not everybody is this way. I also want to start out with a little anecdote about my chicken here because it's important. It's what we're going to talk about. When my grandmother was younger, my grandfather couldn't afford anything, so he gave her this for an anniversary present. She loved it. It was all he could afford. It was a little, I think at the time, it's concrete chicken. It cost maybe 50 cents back when he gave it to her. And she put it in her yard, and she's not a gardener. Granny couldn't grow anything, but she had monkey grass and zinnias and monkey grass. And one year I saw her looking out the window. I said, "What's up, Granny?" She said, "Well, I'm thinking about my zinnias." She was looking out at her garden in the middle of the winter, just as chicken. And I don't know if she was thinking about last year's zinnias or next year's zinnias, but this gave her something to focus on, something to think about. In her mind, in her heart, she saw zinnias. So I put this in my yard, and immediately some of the pruning tastemakers in my town said, "Rushing's got a chicken in his yard. He's got a concrete chicken. He's low class." First of all, I've been to Versailles. I've seen 8-foot naked goddess statues. I get it. But a naked goddess statue is not appropriate in my little garden. It's a little cottage garden in Jackson. It's just not going to fly. This is the right size. It's the right scale. It's the right style. And when I look at that, I don't see a concrete chicken. I see my grandmother in her zinnias. See, so that's the idea of putting things out there to create a feeling or to be in scale, to create a mood, and also maybe to bring some memories. So that's the whole idea. Y'all with me so far? Okay. Now, anybody know what this is? Last thing. It's not a shillelagh. You know, a shillelagh is a head knocker. What is it? It does look like a deer antler. I'll show y'all in a little while. But it talks about garden art. I'm going to show some things that are in different genres. pruning, different ways people express themselves in a garden other than just planting stuff. You know, you can plant stuff out there green side up, and that's about it. Everything else is variation on that. But when it comes to accessorizing, to creating a mood, to create focal points, to get rhythm and repetition, and something to carry the garden through all the seasons, that's where garden art or structures and things like that come in mind. I'm going to show quite a few. As a matter of fact, we're going to go real quick and wear you out on some of that. But when you see this, which is about 18 or so feet tall, out in the middle of nowhere, does it say something to you? Because it says garden. And this is up in Michigan. Well, I see things like this in people's gardens too, and I'm thinking, that's the Chicago Botanic Garden. I'm on to something. They can do that, I can do this, because I can't afford that. That's what I call the good, this is the bad. Wait till you see some of the unbelievable. But I don't understand that. And I saw this in Minnesota, and it's all through the season. It's really big. It's got water coming out of the top. Big public art. This is in a botanic garden in England, in a wildflower area where it had the dandelions blowing like that. So it creates a mood. It lets people know, even when there's no flowers there, it's something that says, I'm in a nature area. See, so there's a reason for doing all these things. One of my neighbors has got this in her yard, and she didn't know what it is because it was there when they bought the house because the people before it had it, and they couldn't move it. But it's just out in her yard, and it doesn't say anything to me except every time I walk by, it draws my attention. And I couldn't tell you what color their front door is. I couldn't tell you if they got shrubs. I can't tell you anything because that's what I see. And that's a real important thing about garden art. It attracts attention. It creates a mood. Here in Meridian, this is, what's Livy's last name? I can't remember her last name. Anyway, a lady lives here in Meridian has got these in her backyard. She got maybe 15 of them. And there's no real reason for putting bottles on sticks except it brings color into a garden where there is no color. It gives us something to focus on. It's something fun to do, something a little bit creative. So I've got a trilogy of books. One is called Pass Along Plants. Have any of y'all seen that? It's about the kind of plants that everybody buys. I mean, everybody grows, but nobody buys. I took this picture last fall right across the street. There's a ditch out here and a building beside it. I don't know the name of the building. Y'all know it? Anyway, there's a ditch right outside here. And that was going on in a little garden on the side. It's got 3 different members of the same family. It's got cotton. It's got cottonleaf mallow. We call it Confederate rose. We got okra, all in the same family. Easy to grow plants that they didn't buy. They got it from somebody, and they put it out there, and it grows, and they can save seeds or they can share it with other people through cuttings. Well, that's an example of taking common old plants that are hard to find commercially, pull them together into a composition that makes people think you know what you're doing. As long as you got something spiky, something roundy, something frilly, people think you know what you're doing. All it lacks is some kind of accessory out there. The second of the trilogy is called Slow Gardening, and it's about the ways people garden, country folks, people who don't follow the horticulture rules, people who don't do things the way they're supposed to. They just grow things for the joy of it, for the seasons. And slow gardening isn't lazy. It means savoring what you do, doing what you want and savoring it. So it's a style of gardening that's more relaxed than horticulture. There's only 2 paragraphs in the whole book on digging dirt, because it's not soil preparation, it's digging dirt to a slow gardener. And this is an example. Last week before my radio program, I had this tomato growing in my yard, and it was yellow. I kept waiting for it to get ripe, and I forgot I planted a yellow one to begin with. And the reason I did that, because birds won't peck a yellow, and people won't steal a yellow tomato because it doesn't look right. But I picked it, and I looked for something to go with it. As I got some jalapeno peppers, which turned red, and then I'm thinking, hey, I've got a rainbow. So my little sweet potatoes, some goldenrod, beauty berry, purple basil, and I did a rainbow of plants that are not in a garden, they're in flower beds just stuck here and there. I grow vegetables as just plants instead of in long, skinny rows like a farmer. So that's the idea of slow gardening. And then the last one is about the kind of people who do what they want to do, how they want to do it, when they want to do it, and if the neighbors don't like it, oh well. We call them determined independent gardeners or diggers. They're not rebels, they're not pushing back, they're simply doing their own thing. Can you tell on this little road which one of those people is a digger? they're going to do their own thing, and they're not being rebellious. It's in them. It's just got to come out. We all have a little bit of it like in there. They garden like children. Children plant stuff every which way. They tend to over-accessorize. They use color. They like a lot of different textures and things. They want something that sparks their imagination. And we all start out that way. And somewhere down along the road, we slowly start withholding, holding it in, being more bashful, worrying about other people thinking. We lose that ability to just do things because you want to do it. Okay, that's what diggers are like. And the book's going to come out in spring. I'm calling it Maverick Gardeners. Dr. Dirt and other determined. Any of y'all ever remember a guy named Dr. Dirt? Used to be a co-host on my radio program. This is an old picture of me and Dr. Dirt. A big, deep, mellifluous voice, beautiful cottage garden, unbelievable garden, no training at all in horticulture. He just loved to collect stuff and pull them all together and tend to accessorize. Just to give an example, here's just some of the pictures from his garden. When he if he didn't have something going on in the wintertime, he cut his grasses back and spray paint them. You know, and he said, you know, people who wear mascara will understand. See, so basically, he tried to have color, texture, throwing away stuff. We didn't call it junk. We call them found objects. Objet trouvé to any of you artist people. But anyway, he tends to grow stuff, you know, in shoes and things like that. He was an original digger. Another one in this book is a friend of mine named Jesse Yancey, who lives in an apartment. He's an older guy, lives in an apartment, and across the street from his apartment, he kept seeing this. Nobody did anything except mow, and he said, what can I do? He asked the property owner, can I plant a few things there? And the guy said, sure. And Jesse turned this into this. Now let me back it up. That ain't much dirt. He grows a lot of stuff in pots on the concrete, but that's what it looks like. And he grows stuff that he likes, and if it doesn't work, he doesn't grow it again. But get this, he has people come from all over the place collecting seeds, and he's sharing stuff. I've got another friend who tends to overdo it with birdhouses. It's a grief garden. Her son died, and the way she dealt with it, she put a birdhouse out there, and then she put another, and she ended up not being able to stop. And then the last one I'm going to mention is a guy named Rick Griffin, who I interviewed on my radio program yesterday. He lives in a kind of community where you have to go to a gate, the guard opens a window and checks a thing to see whether you're supposed to come in or not. It's that kind of neighborhood. But in his backyard, he has a neighbor he didn't really like. So what he did is he put up 2 posts, a mirror, and some birdhouses. What you can't see, that's reflecting his yard. It's a mirror. It's not a gate at all. So when you look at the back of his garden, it looks like it keeps going on and on and on. It's just a mirror, but it hides his neighbor's house. See, that's the way diggers think. Tend to overdo stuff. I live in England part of the year. This is my first year in 12 to be here. And I spend a lot of time walking. I belong to a walking club from the 1890s. And we go to a lot of little villages, and I see a lot of really quirky stuff. But I just want to show you a couple of shots of my garden in England. This is my little herb garden and flower garden. It's just raised beds. It's no different than what I've got in the back of my truck. It's just bigger and on dirt. I also have a little small herb garden in the back. And by the way, I say herb with an H, because it's got an H. Okay? You herb people, the French say herb, British say herb. It's either oregano, tomato, but you know what I'm talking about. This is what it looks like in the summertime. And I've got the little woven fence. You see the little woven fence there? That's called wattle fence. Remember that. It's going to be important a little bit. I've got basil. I've got English peas, rosemary, thyme that's beginning to bloom, a little gnome. But this is what it looks like in the summer. In the wintertime, this is what it looks like. I see my oregano sticking out there. I mean, my rosemary. Because England's not that cold. It's surrounded by warm water, so it doesn't really get ice. It gets snow and fog. But anyway, because of that, I can go out there and knock the snow off and see my little gnome smiling up at me with a little red hat. And one last thing I want to mention. Any of y'all been to England? Okay. If you haven't, you've heard the word scone before. They will never admit this, but a scone is a biscuit, okay? So when they say, oh, it's not, yes, it is. It's got a little bit sweeter stuff in it. One of the things they started doing a long time ago, because the English are very, very tight. They're very, if you've watched Downton Abbey or any of that kind of stuff, they're very formal about stuff. But they all have things in their gardens that when they look at it, it makes them feel lighter, light-spirited. They're called follies. The big estates would have, way up on the hillside, what looks like an old building. It's just a facade. You can sit up there if you want to, but it's just called a folly. It creates that faraway feeling like you really own some stuff. A lot of times they'll do weird things, like this is the field of lavender. Have any of y'all tried growing lavender here? How did that work? Not too good. Yeah, okay. Not like that, because it's too hot here in the summertime. But they put these little tripods there. I don't know if you can tell, but it's also got metal people back in the back, all in the back, because this stuff looks terrible in the wintertime. There's nothing there to see. So they have these things to create a focal point, to add extra color, extra shapes and textures. You know, you can have round stuff, spiky stuff, frilly stuff. And if you don't have spiky or round or frilly, you can put something out there that's a hard feature like this. That's the spiky. And then I see at all these flower shows I go to, and I go to a lot of flower shows, and I see some things that I'm thinking, as long as they're doing stuff like this out there, I'm okay. See, so they tend to push the envelope when it comes to that sort of thing. I'm not going to get, by the way, into what art is, whether talk about classical stuff, formal art, fine art, outsider art, folk art. Not going to get into that artist's eye type of thing, because we all have, anybody who decides how you're going to shape your hair, you know, you make that decision. You're kind of like an artist. If you wear earrings, which ones you want to put on today, long ones or round ones? See, so we have that in us. So how you arrange food on your plate at a buffet really is art. Although some of us keep the gravy from getting in your other stuff. But, we arrange stuff all the time. We just don't really think about it. So I'm not going to get into all that kind of stuff. But I will mention this. I was raised in the Delta, and there was a woman there who used to spray paint numbers on her elephant ears. This is her house. I knocked on the door because I'm like that. Anybody know what the numbers are? Any idea? None? I asked her, and she said 2 words. She says, "Them's NASCAR." She paints her favorite NASCAR race driver's numbers on her elephant ears. Why would you do that? Why would you do that? I don't know why she does it, but it's in her and it's got to come out. So that's the kind of folks I was raised with. I also noticed a lot of things where there's a blank wall in the wintertime, a vine with a little snow on it. It creates a nice little feeling. And if you look around us, there's creative things everywhere. You can make a rainbow with the thumb or the end of a hose. You can change a child's perspective by showing them how to create rainbows. Sometimes there are plants. This is a type of philodendron. It doesn't really look, it looks like it's something you get at an arts and crafts store. It doesn't look real. And even things like spots, diseases on maples, I think that's kind of artistic, because there's nothing you can do about it, so let's go ahead and just like it. So anyway, I see stuff like this, patterns all the time. We got spiky and roundy and little frilly there. And then sometimes you can take a bizarre plant and put it in a pot, but if you put 2 of them in 2 pots, people think you know what you're doing. See? So that's when you're taking it beyond just accessorizing. And then the last one I want to show you is this. This is a caterpillar I found down on the Gulf Coast of Mississippi. I'm not sure who invented that creature, but they had to have a sense of the absurd. What's up with all that stuff? Look at these horns and stuff. Why does a caterpillar do that? I don't know. Maybe they're just leftover parts on day 6. I'm not sure. But the fact is, there are a lot of really interesting things out there if you just slow down and pay attention and see it through other eyes. Now, I've got a friend named David Sellerman. He's an old friend of mine. And this is St. Patrick's Day. This is David. Meet David. Does he look like he's unhappy? No. He tends to over-accessorize, okay? I do too. But my way of thinking, he just does that part of the time, and he has a good time. As long as he's doing that, he feels special. And there's no different than the people who put on grease paint and go to a Saints game, or put on any kind of costume to go to work. So what he's doing is just part of the year just sort of blowing it out. He's expressing himself in a way that other people don't understand, and all he wants is for people just to cut him some slack. He doesn't care if you understand or not. He's expressing himself, and can you respect that? If you can't celebrate, at least respect it. When I was a kid, I'm old enough, maybe some of y'all remember. It used to be the show on Sunday night. We stopped going to church on Sunday nights because of a thing called Wonderful World Disney. Any of y'all ever remember that? It came on a Sunday night, so we saw. It started out in black and white, and then Tinkerbell came out and did her wand, and what happened? It changed color. From black and white, she did like change to color. I bought into that. At the same time, there was a fellow who used to come to my little hometown, Indianola, on Saturdays, driving one of these little blue and gray Ford tractor, little small tractor, and he would come down the main street doing wheelies on his tractor, okay? But the thing I remember, and I was maybe 9 or 10 years old, he had shoes that were spray painted silver with yellow lightning bolts, okay? I thought that was normal. Between Tinkerbell and this kind of stuff, I bought into that in the 1950s and 60s, and I just never outgrew it, thankfully. Now, I went to a place where my ancestors, the Felders, are from a place in Switzerland up in the Alps, and I was riding down this little small town where my ancestors came from in 1735. By the way, did y'all see the movie with Mel Brooks called The Patriot? That was based on a guy named Felder, who was the father of the guy I'm named after. But anyway, in this little small village, they had this. I'm thinking, this is in my genes. They've been doing this in Switzerland since the 1700s. That's where I come from. And then I went to a little place called the Isle of Man where the Rushings are from, and I found this. So I'm thinking, it's in my genetics to tend to do absurd things and feel okay about it. So some of you may have that too. Now, my last slide I'm going to show later is going to have to do with this. What do y'all see here? What do you see? How many of you saw the flag first? Who saw the cups first? Okay, that's really easy. Left brain, right brain. Right brain sees the shapes, the symbolism. Left brain says, how many do they do that with? Can we do something else? Left brain sees the process. Right brain sees the concept. But can we agree that a flag is a flag no matter what it's made out of? That it's a representative symbol? Can we agree on that? Okay, remember that. What is this? Come on. Birds in the window? Yep. What if I were to say those are homemade burglar bars? Which they are. Why not? Homemade burglar bars. You know, you can get the stuff at Home Depot or Lowe's, or you can make your own and be a little creative about it. So you can take ordinary things and make them more interesting, plain and simple. Magnolia, our state flower, state tree, that's beautiful. It's the largest flower in North America. It's celebrated all over the world. Everywhere I go, I see Magnolia grandiflora, our state flower, grown all over the world. But sometimes they don't grow very well, so they do stuff like this. Is that a magnolia flower? Not really, but you get it, don't you? See, that's what art does. Sometimes it's taking something that we understand and we put it in different language. We interpret it using different materials, alternate materials. That's what art is. How about this? This is down in a botanic garden down in Florida. What would you say that is? An orchid? Yeah. It's just a bunch of plastic painted shaped to look like orchid, but it says orchid, doesn't it? That's the idea of art. Now, you can take simple things like containers, have a real busy garden with a lot of stuff going in, and put a pot out there that creates a focal point and repeats the colors. You know, you can do that. Or you can take several out there and get that rhythm and repetition thing going. I'm not going to get into all that. I'm just saying that there are ways you can take this to whatever level you're most comfortable with. The point is, you can get $1 million worth of embellishment in your garden from a single well-placed pot. Just put an urn out there, a rock, a bird bath. Some of you hear me say that on the radio. It doesn't need to be fancy. They got frilly and spiky. They need a roundy. So they put an urn out there. And as a season to come and go, the urn is a focal point. It's like putting your foot on the floor to keep your head from spinning when you've had too much to drink. So, okay, some of you don't get that. I'm from the Delta, remember? But now, get this, what you put in your garden can have an impact. Here's an example. This is in Britain, but if you put a Japanese-looking lantern out there, people are going to say, that's a Japanese garden. Sometimes a piece of sculpture can convey an entire concept on an area that has nothing to do with that concept. So you can create a mood. You can tell people, here's what I want you to think, whether that's true or not. So you can do that. Sometimes just simply a rock. They've got lots of roundy and frilly. They need a spot spiky. They just put a rock out there. I say this to people all the time. Just put a rock out there and then take it from there. You can put lots of rocks. You can do creative stuff. Now, math teachers here? Transitive property of equality. This is the math thing. All that means is if A is equal to B and B is equal to C, then A is equal to C. If this is the same as this and this is the same as this, then this is the same as that. You with me on this? This is real important, real important. I never knew I was going to grow up to do this kind of stuff. This is just something for the sweet peas to grow on. Instead of one, they put two out there. It's made out of recycled wood painted stuff. It's a two-tier, a little teepee. Y'all get that, right? And then you can do that same thing with fancy columns, for recycled columns. This is in Portland, Oregon, and they put the 3 columns out there, and it really said more than just one column. Well, what if you have a big yard, and you like that idea, but you can't afford the columns? Well, how about 3 columns painted white? How about this? Yeah, 3 white columns, 3 white columns. Like it or not, they are the same thing. It's a matter of scale, style, and materials, but they have the same effect. By the way, this is the Chelsea Flower Show in London. It's not just a trashy Delta thing. I see this right outside the National Capitol, the U.S. Botanic Garden, right beside our National Capitol, and they put color out there where they needed color. And then I did this in my yard. I needed some spiky stuff. I cut some boards that would look like Christmas trees, put them out there, painted them kind of a teal in case Martha comes by. And what it does, it takes a really weedy area and makes people say, it's not great, but it's better than just the weeds out there. I also stole somebody threw one of these fire hydrants away, and I dragged it home, and I put it out there, and the fire people were upset with it because it looked like a fire hydrant. So I went out and I liberated 2 more. So I put 3 of them out there, and again, I painted them teal in case Martha came by. And I've got these agave. Any of y'all grow this agave? By itself, it's pure art. It's pure. It grows perfectly well outside Mississippi. But I put those 3 out there and painted them teal, and it looked pretty good. But here's what it looked like yesterday with my goldenrod blooming around it. Okay, let me back it up. That's what it looks like in the wintertime. Here's what it looks like in the fall. Now, if I had just the goldenrod, it would look really crappy. The neighbors would call the code people on me and make me clean it up. But because I had those hydrants out there, people think I know what I'm doing. So they cut me some slack. This is what I'm doing for Halloween. It's real easy. You don't have to spend a lot of money at Home Depot to accessorize. There's a fellow out in Los Angeles, a neighborhood called Watts, who did these towers, made these 3 towers, and they withstand the earthquakes and everything. He tended to overdo stuff on a big scale. I see this everywhere. This is Anton Gaudi in Barcelona, over-accessorizes. I see this out in West Texas called Car Hinge. No, that's not Car Hinge. This is Car Hinge in Nebraska. An entire exact replica of Stonehenge using cars painted gray. Is that Stonehenge? No, but when y'all saw it, did you think Stonehenge? Well, what about Fridge Hinge? See? Different. A is equal to B, B is equal to C. Anyway, these are people who tend to overdo stuff, and there's a word for that. Dementia doesn't always have to be a bad thing. Dementia just means a proclivity towards something more than the people around you, maybe. Well, there's one called Dementia concretia. They're people who they start doing things and they can't stop. Hoarders have got Dementia concretia. But a lot of people start doing something and they keep going, they keep adding. First thing you know, their whole place is full of stuff, and they suffer. They don't suffer because these people tend to outlive other people, and they're happier than their family, obviously, and happier than their neighbors, I might add. But it's a real term. It's a real term. And we see this. Who's ever stacked rocks? Any of y'all ever stacked any rocks or seashells or anything? You know, there are 2 things that happen. First of all, you feel a little exposed, you know. This is not normal, but I did it anyways. It makes me feel good. That's a psychology thing. But the sociology kicks in. What are the neighbors going to think? Are they going to think I'm crazy? You know, you worry about what other people think. It's a psychological thing, and then it brings in the sociology of what's going on. Dementia concretia is when you do something simple like this, you like it so much, you can't stop. Okay? That's when the neighbors start talking. Okay? But that's an example of dementia concretia. Dementia concretia. 1 bowling ball is all you need, folks. Just 1. 3, looks like you know what you're doing. This, you got a little problem. You need to up your Wellbutrin just a little bit, okay? Now, take it to an extreme. This is what we call a total yard show. They're all over the world. They're in every culture. Is there one here in Meridian? Yes, there's plenty of them. There's a type of person who expresses themselves beyond the pale. They tend to over-accessorize. Okay, they're the people who wear too much jewelry, too many tattoos, too many of this kind of thing. Maybe they're the ones who put on costumes and grease paint and go to a Saints game. You know, when they get home, they take all that off and they go to work and they're just normal people. But when they're around Saints fans, they're okay because everybody understands. The problem with this is they're overdoing it, and because they're all alone, they feel like that they're the only person doing that. But if you look down on the world at all the people who do this, there's millions of them. Millions in every culture. Japan, I've seen them everywhere. They're the kind of people who overdo things, and the problem is they don't have a venue for getting together and sharing like Saints fans do. See, so they feel like they're all alone, and what that does is it feeds on it, and they end up doing more and more and more until they just get to the point where it's not that we don't care, it just doesn't matter. You know, we're beyond all that. I see it in England. My friend with all the birdhouses in her yard, she has maybe 150 birdhouses. You could take little simple things like you can't grow stuff in a pot. You can put rocks in a pot and create something. Look at that. It's just rocks in a pot. See, so you don't have to go whole hog and have a great big garden full of stuff. Where you put your feet can be important. You can do something fancy with little rocks and create designs, or you can have your kids do something like this. You know, any of y'all ever do this with your kids? I still have the ones that my kids did, and they're grown. I still have the same thing that they did when they were kids, because I'm teaching them to be a little creative, do something unique, and I'm saving it for them. Matter of fact, they don't realize that one of them's getting it for Christmas. Even benches where you put your seat, you can create something besides just a store-bought bench. Arbors, garden-esque arbor. I just I'm putting a new arbor in my yard, and I got a 137-year-old piece of cedar. It's 22 feet tall. It's 8 inches in diameter. And I put it out there, and it was just a square piece. I love it. It's great. I love it, but I couldn't just leave it alone. So I got one of these things, and I have a square at the top, square at the bottom, made it round in between. Now, why would I do that? Partly because I don't have anything else to do all day. Too early to drink. You know, so let's just do that. But I took some of the square and I made it part square and part round, because that's just a little creative thing. There's only one animal that does this, called bowerbirds. Have y'all ever heard of a bowerbird? You got bowerbirds in New Zealand. I'm not sure where they're from. What's that? Australia. Australia is New Zealand, same thing. Come on. You know, one's like this, one's like this. But I did that because it made me feel better. And when I put my hand on it, it's smooth. Oh, when I get through sanding, it's going to be nice and smooth. And I'll probably paint it just a little bit different color. How we light our gardens. Right now, you can get away with murder in your garden this time of year with holiday lighting. You can do anything right now and get away with it. But during the year, what about when you have regular night lighting? Look at the patterns that the light makes in the garden where there was nothing there before. You could have the light fixture itself can be interesting. You can have all sorts of creative things besides just where to put your feet. Night lighting. Now, I want to quickly go through a few shots of my little yard. Because it's what my neighbors call an attractive nuisance. People want to just walk through my yard. And there's some things in there they really don't want to see. Trust me on that. It's my yard. So I put a gate out there, but instead of just a regular gate, I got me there's your pickup truck has got a hole in the back bumper where you put these little knobs you pull stuff with. I just have a hole. So I put metal in it and I bent it, all different shapes. I had somebody weld it like this, and I hit it with some salt water, let it rust. Instead of just a regular old fence gate, I've got a special gate. My yard looked like this when I first bought it. It's just big enough along the street to park my truck and my pickup, my truck and my Jeep. That's it, 35 feet wide. That's my whole front yard. Very bad feng shui, okay, poison arrow. That's what it looked like when I moved in, and here's what it looks like now. You walk up, You take a few steps, you gradually go up, you take a step, go up here, and take a step and keep going up. And when you're up there looking back towards the street, that's how my garden looks. People drove by and look at my yard and say, I seen your yard, Felder. And I'm thinking, you ain't seen my yard. You seen the back of my yard, because my garden is from the house looking out towards the street. So when they say they've seen it from the street, they really haven't. It's a living area. This is what it looks like from the street. Any of y'all live in a neighborhood that would not allow me to live in a neighborhood? They got them. You have to do stuff like this in the backyard. You remember it's just all grass and all, but it used to be just sit down, you just walk around, and you can't see all that other stuff in there. All you can see is that from the street. Along the street, I did this. I made a fence out of some corrugated metal, and I put this out here. That's what it looked like. And see this telephone pole right here? It was brown. It's a poison arrow from feng shui. So anyway, I took this and I mulched it and I planted stuff, and here's what it looked like yesterday. And by the way, I camouflaged my face. By the way, this is the proposed Mississippi flag, Magnolia flag. But this is what it looks like now, and you can't see my house from the street because of that. In the yard looking out towards the street, this is what I see. I see places to be, places to sit, places to relax and enjoy stuff. Here's what it looks like in the wintertime, where there was nothing but St. Augustine grass had to be mowed all the time. There's not a blade of grass in my yard, and I wrote the foreword to the best-selling lawn care book in the South. Somebody said, how can you be a lawn expert without any grass? I'm thinking, brain surgeon doesn't need a tumor, okay? When it comes to lawn care, I can help you. I don't want to do all that stuff. So anyway, this is what it looks like in the wintertime. I've got fire in the wintertime, water and fire, because I think we're hardwired for these things. And in a way, that's sort of interesting where you can poke at it, you can make flames go. It's sort of to me, it's like art. You're sitting out there getting away from the television, seeing who's caught what and who's blowing each other up. Sit out there and burn fire. I also took my great-grandmother's bathtub and I put it out in a corner where nobody can see it and over-accessorized it. And I grow herbs in a 6-foot diameter horse trough, because that way I don't have to bend over. And it was cheaper than a pot. You can get those things for a 6-foot diameter thing for under $200. Try to find a big pot that size. And then the arbor, entry arbor. You go into my house, you have to go up under this. It's just raised up. It's just a pot on some sticks, big pot on sticks with all this in the wintertime. This is, when you look at my driveway, you see this. It's a little garden. It's got succulents and herbs and things like that. What you don't realize, that's not just a container. If you're from in the backyard walking toward the street, this is what you see. I put my trash cans up under a container. See, we all have trash cans just sitting out there. That's wasted space. People in the space station can see it, but that's just something to hide my trash cans. And yes, I even accessorize that. My truck out there, it started out looking like this. I started out with a bag of potting soil, with tomatoes and peppers and a periwinkle in the back, and it worked. It worked. So the next year I added a bigger bag of potting soil. By the way, that's my son's child restraint seat. He's a 35-year-old Army officer right now, but when he was in a baby seat, I was doing this stuff, and he thinks it's normal. What I've done now is I got a box that's full of potting soil. I got some boards to keep it from all sliding down if I take off, and I accessorize the back of it to where it doesn't look like a box, and then I fill it with stuff. Just fill it with stuff. If something dies, I pull it out, stick something else in a hole. Any questions? And if the wind can't take the wind, or can't take 105 degrees, or can't take 15 degrees, or can't take sitting out there all summer when I'm going to England and somebody's got to water it, it's going to die. So over the years, I've replaced it with plants that will survive with no care at all. But I mixed them all up, shapes and sizes and colors and textures, and then I over-accessorized it. Really, really bad. Or really well. Back of my pickup truck. That's my little truck. So anyway, you get the idea on that. I also had a pothole in my street. So what will grow in a pothole in the middle of the street that the garbage truck can go over and not knock it over? So I found plants that will actually grow in the sidewalk, in the potting soil. Don't tell me you can't garden, because you can do it. Now, I saw this in California one time, and they had put it in a botanic garden. It looked like it was natural, but they put it out there on purpose. It's called a snag. because there's nothing else. They just needed something in the foreground for people to take pictures besides just the sand dunes. And I keep that in mind. In my back garden, by the way, I live in a cabin in the backyard. I rent my house out to medical students because I travel a lot. I live in a cabin in the backyard, and I dug up the driveway and used the concrete to make a little raised bed, put me a water garden there, and then I started adding plants, hostas and things, because of the shade garden. And so I turned it into a little garden on top of the concrete, just like my friend Jesse Yancey. And it still needed something. So I started putting me a rock out there. I put an old piece of log, and look at these wonderful fungi and the lichens and stuff growing on it. And to me, that was kind of cool because it was interesting. It was a hard feature, interpreted as a shade garden, and it had all this cool stuff. It's a real slow decay process. And I thought that was kind of interesting. Well, I took it a little too far. I saw this in a place in England. And this is called a stumpery from the 1800s. And so I did this in my backyard. I've got what's called a stumpery. Any of you got too much shade in your yard? That's something you can do with it. That's something you can do with it. Just a stumpery. My son came up to visit me the other day and said, Dad, the wind blew something out in your yard. I said, no, it didn't. I dragged that up from down the street and put it across my yard. And you have to step over it to get to my yard, but it slows you down, it makes you think. And if you don't know about it and you're sneaking in my yard at night, there's a surprise waiting on you. But I put that there just as sort of time, but you remember the before picture of just the garden. Well, my stumpery and all this, it just gives me something that creates that idea that I'm from the Delta and I've got Spanish moss and things like that in the garden. I also have mirrors in my garden because of the little yard, and to keep it from being too small, I put mirrors to make it look bigger. That's a reflection from these mirrors, and hung crepe myrtle branch to keep the birds from banging into it. And now they perch on it and they peck at each other all day long. But it's something to keep the birds in. It's really important to keep in mind when it comes to accessories, you can get away with, you can use garden art to get away with other stuff. Here's an idea of a meadow, a wildflower meadow, and they put big balls of rocks in it because it was just a big garden. Well, when I first started out, I planted wildflowers, past president of the Native Plant Society, love native plants, love wildflowers. And that looks okay if you're just looking for wildflowers, but it needed something. Wasn't quite sure. A friend of mine said, why don't you put a piece of split rail fence in there? Just simple split rail fence. It creates a line. It has that human scale. It makes it feel like it's done on purpose. It gives things something to swirl around. And I didn't like the idea at all at first. And my friend Rick Griffin said, just give it a try, Felder. Just relax. I said, it's cynical. It's Disney-esque. I like pure wildflower. He said, just give it a try. So against my better judgment, against my horticulture pride and my native plant love and all that, I put it out there, and immediately it made the cover of Southern Living magazine. And I did not want to do it. So my point is, if you want to get away with wildflowers or even just weeds in your yard, put a piece of split rail fence. This is taken in England. Every flower in here is native to Mississippi, but this is in England. They put an old piece of split rail fence to make it feel like it's in a real garden. So that's the idea. You want to plant something in your yard, put an old wagon wheel out there, let the neighbors get used to it, and then plant you a nice little flower by it and let it get used to it, and then start planting other stuff. And first thing you know, you've got something going. Now I want to mention this about mowing grass. I'm a turf guy. I consult with golf course people. But does this guy look like he's happy? No. It's something that society tells him he needs to do. So again, he's a helicopter pilot, by the way. So every now and then he has to get out and mow the grass. He's not happy at all, but that's what society tells him he has to do. And you don't have to do that. You don't have to do stuff like this all your life, okay? It's not a requirement in America to have wall-to-wall grass. You can use grass as a pet, like a goldfish in a bowl. You can even accessorize it if you want to. For several years, I had grass in a little red wagon in Tiger Woods, and I cut it, I watered it, I mowed it, I did pull the weeds, I did everything that you do in an area this big with a beer in one hand, okay? So if you have that in you and it's just got to come out, you can do it on a small scale. That's my point. The idea, though, is let people know that you do it on purpose. Where grass peters out in the shade, you use mulch. You put something out there that people focus on. They don't know whether they have weeds in your yard or not. You can do bizarre stuff with grass. I've seen some really bizarre stuff done with grass. I might want to mention this. Here at the Max, they've got a beautiful lawn out here, and it's artificial turf. I don't know if y'all noticed that, but it's not just fake grass, astroturf. If you look at it, it's got different color greens. It even has brown fabric worked in there like thatch, so it looks like real grass. It's well done artificial turf, and it works in a lot of different places. Or else you could just take a part of your yard, have grass in part of it, and other stuff. You don't have to have wall-to-wall carpet. You can have a throw rug out there, so or a labyrinth instead of grass, or moss. Some of you have where the grass peters out and just grow moss. Put something out there, it makes people think you're doing it on purpose. You know, and a Japanese lantern, and people think that's nice instead of they got a crappy looking yard. Put something out there that gives somebody to focus on. Even ground covers can be accessorized. I've seen people take tires and do inches things where they need round shape and paint, you know, primary colors, and that's nice, but it's too big for my yard. I saw this though between Starkville and Louisville, and let me explain what's going on here. They did this on purpose. Y'all get that? It didn't happen by itself. They dug a little hole. They stood a tire up, which showed intent. They painted it, maybe twice, which shows a little creativity, and they planted some plants by it. See, those were all conscious acts in a country house or another, and then they repeated it over there. See, this is something where people don't have the wherewithal to do fine art. They just create things and do things on their own as best they can. And we've seen things like, I want to make sure I don't run out of time here. You take a tire, turn it inside out, and paint it if you want to. And by the way, if you want to know how to take a tire and turn it into a planter, it takes me about 5 minutes without hurting myself. And I'll be glad to show you how to do that sometime, or just shoot me an email and I'll send you pictures on how to do it. Tires in East Hampton, New York. This is my jack-o'-lantern made out of a 3-wheeler tire. And then the neighbors went berserk over this. I stacked some. It took me a long time to get the right kind of tires, stack them up, paint them different colors, a little bit of blue, different color green. And I thought the neighbors would think it was really cool. They didn't like it at all. And I'm thinking, okay, well, you just wait till Christmas then. And when it comes to human figure, and I'm going to go through this real quick because we got a little bit, because I took too much time explaining stuff. I love the human figure in the landscape. It's easy to do, different kind of materials. You can carve it in your trees. You can buy parts and nail them to your trees. You can cut them into your cactus if you want to. It doesn't hurt the cactus. But we're creating that idea of a human thing. But we see people doing sculpture. This is what I call the good. That's really, really nice. It's expressive. It has motion and all. That's real art. And then this is bad, but it's still expressive. I'm not going to climb over that fence, see what's on the other side. And then the unbelievable. So we see the human figure used in so many different ways. Remember my gnome? Well, there's a group of people saying you shouldn't put gnomes in your yard because they're not supposed to be in your yard. You need to let them loose in the woods. And so I went to a place called the Gnome Reserve in England. It's got over 2,000 gnomes that have been sent there from all over the world, rescued from people's yards. Paint them on trees. Saint statue, I'm not Catholic, but I have this guy, Saint Fiacre. He's got a shovel. He's got flowers. Saint Fiacre, the official patron saint of gardeners. I've seen statues in public gardens where I can't show the picture in Mississippi. You got to watch your camera angle with some of this stuff, okay? But you know, when it comes to expressing yourself, sometimes you have to keep your neighbors in mind. This is in every fancy garden all over the world. But I can't do that in my yard. So what am I going to do if I want to celebrate that figure in my garden in Jackson? Nope, can't do that. How about that? I can do that because it's whimsical and my garden is whimsical. I can get away with doing that kind of thing. When it comes to scarecrows, there's so many different ways. I wrote a whole book on scarecrows, and there's a lot of ways you can make cool ones, but here's the one that kids can make. A stick, clothes hanger, piece of clothing, and a creative head. It's all it takes for kids to have a nice scarecrow. You don't have to have pants and all that stuff. So kids can learn early on to be creative. They can work their way up to fancier type of scarecrows and unusual things. Here's one made out of beer cans, which by the way had a big wasp nest in it, I found out. Here's one downspout. Here's an electric fence in Alaska. You're going to touch it, see if it's live or not. And here's one in my garden that a friend of mine made out of recycled parts. He said it looked like me. I'm not sure. By the way, I put it up against this blue vine. Anybody have a blue vine? I didn't either, but I had some spray paint. Okay, I mean, I've been to the art parks. This is in Austin, Texas, where they put it there for people to spray paint, and constantly doing it. It's right across the river downtown Austin. And then I saw where they spray painted poison ivy, and I'm thinking, that's cool. Why not? Were y'all expecting this morning? No? Well, last week I was walking up the street and a neighbor came in and said, Felder, look at this. She has this beautiful native coreopsis growing in her. Lots of coreopsis there. She said, this is a purple one. Wow. I said, great. Take a picture of that and send it to me. And she did. This is a picture she sent me. She said, what's up with the purple coreopsis? She didn't realize that I had been walking home from the place and I had some purple spray paint. And I spray painted one of her flowers, and it took her like 3 days to find out what it was. And she took a picture of it. I said, wow, I've never seen that. Did you save some seeds? See, art can be used as anarchy too. And when it comes to pruning stuff, let me throw this out. When it comes to having bird figures, this is nice. It's evocative. I don't even know what kind of bird it is, but I can't afford it. It's Victorian. It's expensive. It's an antique. But I can do this. Granny's chicken in my yard on a plinth has the same effect, different style, different materials. I can't have a pink flamingo because they live to be 30 years, and if they break their leg, you can't eat it or anything. So I'd rather have the real thing. I've seen brass ones, and that's nice, but I can't afford that. I've seen made out of mufflers. I guess I could do that. How about this? A flamingo made out of chicken wire. Is it still a pink flamingo? But it's not as tacky as the one we think. How about the Calder sculpture downtown Chicago called Flamingo? This is what most people expect to say pink flamingo, though. They think something like this. Well, I've seen flamingos used poorly, but so many of them, people think you know what you're doing. This is what my yard looks like. I've got to scatter out, and I move them around from time to time to make people less judgmental, I guess. By the way, the bird flu hit my garden one year. Just want to throw that out. And I have one that's over-accessorized. She's been all over the world. She's been from Stonehenge to Alaska glaciers to volcanoes in South America. She's been all over the place. But the reason I mention this is because I met this guy here. I had my hair tied back so much it looked skinny. But here's my wonderful little flamingo that was made by a friend of mine named Bill Timms from Laurel. And this guy right here is named Don Featherstone, 1957, an art school graduate. His first job out of art school was working at a plastic factory. He designed and patented the first ever plastic pink flamingo. He did the ducks and all that stuff too. But he patented the first one in 1957. The feathering detail is, you know, if it doesn't say Featherstone, it's a fake plastic flamingo. The Featherstone are real. I even got him to autograph mine. So when I say I've got a pink flamingo, people say, well, that's just tacky. Real quick definition. The difference between tacky and gaudy, and this is important if you want to yard art your place up. Gaudy is when you do something that people may not understand, and they may not like it, but they think you know what you're doing, so they cut you some slack. You with me on that? Tacky is when you just don't know any better, bless your heart. Okay? Two flamingos are tacky because they come in pairs. You put a bunch of them out there and move around, that's gaudy. And one last quote, Don Featherstone, I asked him why he did it. He and I gave a lecture up in St. Louis one time, and I said, why'd you do this? He said, think about this, Felder. Before plastic, only rich people could afford poor taste. Is that liberating or what? So, here's a couple of mine. Granny's chicken. Does it make a little bit more sense now? It does to me. And here's the point. Rubber ducks are just as important as china vases. Whether you like it or not, personally or not, that's okay. And you can do all sorts of other figures in the garden. Little rabbits, you can have a fish, which doesn't make sense at all. You can have oversized frogs, you can have dinosaurs if you want to. And people are going to talk about you if you do this stuff. But get this, it doesn't matter, and my friend Jim Perry from Philadelphia told me this. He said, it doesn't matter what you do or how you do it, your neighbors are going to talk about you anyway. So just relax and enjoy yourselves. These are ways people have expressed themselves. Oh, when it comes to pruning stuff, let me throw this out. This is in Dallas. Somebody wanted to know why they had this yellow spot on this shrub. It was his dog. Okay, his dog did that. But while I was there, I said, why did you do that? And he said, well, you can't just sit there. Everybody else got a little ball or a pointy thing. He did a little creative, little twisty thing with some pruning shears. Is he bad for doing that? No, he's not bad. He's being creative. But hold on. They do stuff like this for punctuation in England and European type gardens. Edward Scissorhands taught us all about this kind of stuff. The oldest topiary in Europe, just north of where I live, they've been doing this since the 1870s to these plants. And the ones that are pruned outlive the same species outside that are not pruned. It actually helps them a lot. Rose Society says it's supposed to prune a rose above an outward facing 5-leaflet leaf. Have y'all heard that? Prune a rose above an outward facing 5-leaflet leaf. You can prune roses with a cherry bomb and they'll still bloom. It doesn't matter how you do it. But if you're gonna do pruning horticulturally, like with this fruit tree, it makes sense. There's reasons for pruning. Doesn't hurt a plant to cut it off at knee high and make it bush out. Doesn't hurt the plant from a physiology point of view. Reason I mention that, because you could take a naturalistic looking thing that reminds me of my hair, when I look at it like that, and then take it and prune it into shapes with some pruning shears, artistic. Just pruning a shrub into a ball or a square is being artistic. You're creating shapes. You can have knot gardens. You can have fancy. What you want to bet the lady who lives here doesn't do the pruning herself? Probably not. Well, how about this? This guy is in California making his neighbors mad because of making them look bad. Making them look bad. Being creative with pruning shears. Not that hard to do. Downtown New York, Brooklyn, sofa, end tables, lamps. A guy named Pearl Fryer in South Carolina, Bishopville, South Carolina. Does not know how to spell topiary, but he does stuff like this in his yard. He drives a school bus, and he does this when he gets home. Being creative. And this is outside Black Hawk, Mississippi, between Vaden and Greenwood. Black Hawk, Mississippi. And I asked the guy, he said, well, you can't just sit there. Express themselves. This is in Japan, they call them floating clouds. We call them poodle bushes, right? Any of y'all call these poodles? This is a poodle. You can do that to a dog and a shrub, but what's up with the purple ribbons? Got no. He said, please don't do that to me. Reason I'm saying that, because I had to shear my dog. He had way too much hair. If I'm going to shear him every year, I'm going to have fun with him. Okay? And some people, hey, you shouldn't do that. I'm thinking, you should see what my daughter does to her hair. And this is my dog, Rusty. When he looks at me in the morning, he says, okay, Felder, what are we going to do? What are we going to do today? And I'm leading up to a point here. He says, we're going to do something interesting today. Let's, woo. One day I caught him, took a little stick of mine. I had a little stick that's got 1 million frequent flyer miles on it. It's from a Shinto temple in Japan. A little piece of black bamboo. I carried it all over the world. He did what any dog would do, and he chewed it up. Now let me back it up. Eager, looking forward to the day, and look at him now when I hollered at him. His tail is just barely going. Has anybody ever made you feel this way for doing something you thought was okay, and you got punished for it? Have any of y'all ever been made to feel that way? Some of you make other people do that all the time. Any master gardeners here? I can talk about them then, can't I? Master gardeners make people feel bad when they see somebody take a crepe myrtle. This is their church, not far from where I live. Same plant in the wintertime, and do this with it. People say, oh, you can't prune crepe myrtles. You're a bad dog. Bad dog. For pruning crepe myrtle. Doesn't hurt the crepe myrtle. Trust me on this. Doesn't hurt it at all. This is Colonial Williamsburg. They've been doing it for 250 years. Colonial Williamsburg. Doesn't hurt the plant at all. And this is Japan. They've been doing this for 700 years. And we say you're a bad person if you do that in Meridian, Mississippi. This is crepe murder. when you cut it to the ground. And it sprouts right back out. The reason I'm mentioning that, because here's a picture of me hugging the oldest crepe myrtle in North America from the 1700s. So I appreciate crepe myrtles. I've seen them, they're beautiful. I love the architectural effect. And here's a correct way to prune them, thin them, and all like that. The reason I'm mentioning all this is because we found you can cut a crepe myrtle to the ground and it'll sprout back out, right? That's called coppicing in Europe. They cut them to the ground, they sprout back out, and 5 or 6 years later they have uniform fence posts. They grow fence posts by cutting them down. 4 or 5 years later, uniform straight fence posts. And then when they cut those back, they have all these little long things that come out. And that's where they get the fence posts and the weaving for their fences. They grow their own fences by coppicing and pollarding into those balls. They grow their own fence material. This is before stained glass. Some plants you cut to the ground, new growth comes up every year. It looks beautiful. That's a type of red twig dogwood. And then here's an American Horticultural Society headquarters in Alexandria, Virginia. Here's an unpruned tree, and here's one that's been pruned since 1918. American Horticultural Society. They say it's okay. So when Master Gardener says you're a bad person for doing this, they're being tastemakers. This is an artistic thing to do. So here's my point. Whether you like this or not, whether you like pink flamingos or not, it's like rolling toilet paper. How many of you this way? How many of you this way? Is anybody going to change your mind? The kind of people who say you shouldn't do this, you shouldn't do pink flamingos, you shouldn't prune your crepe myrtles, they're the same kind of people who come to your house at a party and turn the roll around and try to make you feel bad. Okay? Same thing. So I'm just saying that. I got a friend in my neighborhood who paints his dead tree like that. I wanted the tree from my stumpery. He said, nope, I got a use for it. Next thing I knew, he painted it. And I've seen trees painted in fancy botanic gardens all over the place. Metal trees, don't stick your tongue to it. These trees are made out of pieces of metal. This is in Oxford, England. Pieces of metal look like a tree. I've seen hubcap trees, tuba trees, birdhouse trees, toilet trees, Easter egg trees. You see what I'm saying? There's no real rhyme or reason for saying this is good or this is bad. When people do things every which way, they do exactly what they want to do. Now, I got 2 more little genres of yard art and I want to show you. Here's one that's real important. In the wintertime, sun gets low, there's not much color out there. This little pineal gland the size of a grain of rice, it shrivels up. We get what they call seasonal affective disorder, the blues, because your pineal gland, from lack of stimulation. In European gardens, they would put stained glass, or they would put this in their windows because it gives them color. It keeps them from getting depressed. It gives them color when there is none. And there's psychological reason for that. You could put color in shady areas. You can hang it in your trees. You could put glass insulators on cut back crepe myrtles if you want to. But the idea is to put color out there. Now some people say that you really shouldn't do stuff like this because it's tacky. You all remember tacky versus gaudy? Well, in my yard, there's if you're here at the Max, if you go up to the chapel, that beautiful stained glass window, the stained glass they've got here, that was done by a fellow named Andrew Young. This is Andrew Young's work in my garden. So just want to let you know that I've got nice glass in my yard, but I also have stuff like this to keep burglars out. It's just burglar bars across my back fence, but if you're going to have that, might as well be something pretty. And by the way, I don't have to worry about their fingerprints. I got their fingertips. You can hang stuff on the wall where there's just nothing but a blank wall, a fence out in your garden. You do it in your house, why not in your garden as well? Stained glass, I've seen beautiful stained glass, and I've seen where people couldn't afford stained glass, so they painted it in a little country chapel in Louisiana. Is that okay? You can't afford it, so you paint it? Well, how can you compare what I'm talking about to stained glass windows? Well, I saw this in Atlanta, Georgia. It's very, very nice. I'm thinking, I can't afford that, but I can do this with some bamboo and some wine bottles. I've seen tall glass sculptures in Germany. I've seen them in Scotland where they just have a swooping thing with some glass on it. Have y'all heard of Dale Chihuly? What does he do for a living? He puts glass in people's yards. It's fancy glass, like what Andrew Young does. And I've seen some really good ones, some really interesting stuff. This is a water fountain in Atlanta, Georgia, a Chihuly sculpture. I can't afford that. So what am I going to do if I want to have something like that? Well, I got some wine bottles and some copper. I guess I could do that. Instead, I do bottle trees. I want to hasten to mention, some people don't like bottle trees. I get it. I had one lady say, they're tacky. I'm thinking, maybe I shouldn't say this because I was raised right, but I did anyway. I said, you know you're hanging stuff out of holes in your ears. And she said, I beg your pardon. I said, that's right. You do holes in your ears, I do bottle trees. We're even. I've seen some, this Memphis Botanical Garden. It's not about voodoo, by the way. That's an old myth from the 3,000 years ago, Aladdin and the genie. The jinns, the genies in the lamps. That's where that comes from the Arabian Peninsula. So it's not about that. It's not about genies coming out. It's not voodoo. All we're doing is holding glass up to the sky so its colors can sing. Holding glass up so its colors can sing. That's all we're doing. Looks good with it backlit. Looks good in the wintertime. It's just something to put out there where there's no color before. Any questions about that? No. You can get away with it even in Madison, Mississippi, which is, they think you can't do anything in Madison. Yeah, you can. Here's one, a neighbor of mine. This is what her bottle tree looked like back in the spring when the purple coneflowers. Well, yesterday afternoon I went back to take a picture of the same bottle tree, the same place. This is what it looked like yesterday. Oops. It was getting kind of dark when I took the picture, kind of fuzzy. But that's springtime, and that's the fall. And it's still there all the time. Here's one of my bottle trees, and I'm going to sort of wrap up the bottle tree thing by showing this. This is in my side yard where the neighbors can see it, and it's just a bottle tree there, but sometimes I grow tomatoes on it. Sometimes I put lights on it. Sometimes I just let it hold snow up where I don't have to bend over to lick it. But it's there all the time, this color when I had none. And it's easy, and it's fun, and it's interesting. And I think the tallest bottle tree in Mississippi. I had a cedar tree, it had to be cut down. So instead of cutting it down, I just had it bobbed off, and I did this with it. And the neighbors went berserk. You know what? I hate to say this because it sounds like I'm being arrogant, but they say, don't you care? I said, I do care. It just doesn't matter. Well, we just don't. I said, my yard's been in Southern living, and yours ain't. So, to kind of wrap stuff up, I spend a lot of time looking at things and being exposed to things and being taught things. There's not an original bone in my body. I'm what they call an early adopter. Now, if I see a good idea or a bad idea, I weigh them. And sometimes good ideas and bad ideas are the same idea, just put different ways. And so you try to do things the best you can. I see beautiful stained glass windows that have this sort of stuff. And then I saw this, and it reminds me, that's what I do. On my radio program, my column, I'm just sowing seeds and just throwing stuff out there. And, sometimes it's going to fall on a hard place and not going to sprout. Sometimes it takes root. And that's all I've tried to do today, show you too many examples of the same thing over and over and over. People express themselves simply and sometimes complicated, and the whole idea is to take it where you want to. My next to last slide, I want to show you this. I saw this in Del Rio, Texas, an agave. I'm thinking, I can do that because those are silk flowers. And instead of poking your eye out and putting little wine corks on the bottom, they stuffed those in there. Everybody else had just agaves. These people had agaves with flowers on them. I'm thinking, that's a good idea. So I got a friend of mine from down the street to remember the guy mowing the grass, the lawnmower guy? He comes up to hide from my yard from his wife. I love Karen, believe her name really is Karen. But he brought his son up there one time, and I gave little D's, gave him something to do. I gave him a styrofoam egg carton and showed him how to cut them up and stick them on my yuccas out front. And his mother hit the ceiling. She said, he's too young to accessorize. And I'm thinking, he's okay with it. You're too old to be doing that kind of judgmental stuff. So, remember the picture I showed about the flag? How many of you see the heart that when you saw the flag, you just saw the cups? How many of you see the heart now instead of just the cups? It's the same thing with the flag or heart. It's just symbolic. It's representative, and that's what we're trying to do. I didn't know it was going to go up to be this way. stuff like this. I saw this. I'm thinking, I'm going to put that in my yard. I've got 6 of them. I don't know where they're going to go, but I'm going to put them out there. And then, remember this I mentioned earlier? What is it? That's a crepe myrtle stem. It's been cut back, just like they've been doing in Japan for 600 years. And when it sprouts these long things out, and they bloom, in the wintertime I cut them back and I use them to weave my little fence around Granny's chicken. Remember that picture of the chicken that had a little woven fence? It comes from this right here. So it's just like having pretty vegetables that you can eat when you're tired of looking at them. You can do something neighbors think is really, really bizarre and make a fence out of it. Anyway, I really appreciate the opportunity. I've kind of rambled a lot. I'm not an artist. I just want to show you stuff I've seen, and the people here at the Max have given me a really good opportunity to share some of this stuff with y'all. That's it. Anybody have any questions or comments or want to throw stuff? Wore you out, didn't I? No, but I've got a real good. I got a real good friend, Bob Ruzak, teaches at Mississippi State. He got back this past last fall from over there. He showed me some wonderful pictures. Oh, they have wonderful stuff, but they won't let me in Singapore right now because my American passport, everybody treats it like it's got stuff, bad stuff dripping off of it. I have an American passport, and they won't let me use it anywhere in the world right now because it's covered with virus. The reason I'm here, not in England, they won't let me over there. Well, I see a lot of stuff even right here in Meridian. One picture I did not show y'all was the grave of the grave of the Gypsy King at Rose Hill Cemetery. Have y'all seen that? Yeah. Now that's over accessorized. People put all sorts of stuff, but because of the Gypsy King, you cut up some slack. See, it's just everywhere you look, whether it's a decorated grave or towering botanic gardens in Singapore, the upside down, all that. Other question or comment? Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I was wondering about how exactly you make the fence from the crepe myrtle.
You get.
You soak it? I mean, how do you weave it?
Well. What you know, most of the time you stick stop. You know, you cut the crepe myrtle and you put them in the ground. I use rebar iron rebar because it's permanent. And then you just take it and you just weave it from one behind in front behind like that. Yeah, and just alternate like that. And it's called wattle fencing, and they've been doing it in Japan and Europe for centuries before you could buy chain link fence. They grew their own fence this way, so it's horticulturally appropriate. Yes, sir.
Where do you come across a lot of blue bottles? Paint bottles or
Sky Vodka.
Sorry?
Sky Vodka. There's a couple of wines that have blue bottles. Used to be Milk of Magnesia was in blue glass bottles, but in plastic bottles now. You can also go online and buy them by the case. Yeah, there's all sorts of blue bottles. If you just haven't been to a liquor store lately. Anyway, you can get them online. There's plenty of them online. I will mention this: blue is a magical color. It's a calming effect. They used to limit how much blue could be put in stained glass windows because it made people's minds wander. And this is true. And it's cobalt. The color cobalt was named cobalt because it was a byproduct of the silver mines, and there was a poisonous gas that was killing the miners, and they blamed it on these mythical little things called kobolds, little mountain dwarfs called kobolds, and that's where the word cobalt came from. Isn't this some stupid stuff to know? Anyway, I think I pretty well worn y'all out. Thank you again. I really appreciate your attention. Y'all appreciate it.